Parents who have disowned or genuinely stopped loving your child. What happened?
I love my son, but he abused me. When he turned that violence onto his sister by choking her, I had to say goodbye. I have disowned my oldest son. He molested my daughter, has been diagnosed as a sociopath, and we have restraining orders against him. It isn't fun, and I never thought I would be that parent. I asked my biological father at 28 why he never tried to see me after he and my mom got a divorce. He said he never wanted to try for any custody arrangement because that meant he would have to pay child support. So the fear of child support led him to stop talking to his 9-year-old. He's currently doing the same thing to my 2 younger half-sisters. Some people just really shouldn't be parents. My father said my mother's issue was she had too many children and it gave her some kind of brain fever, much like a dog that loses its mind after having too many puppies. My mother said my father felt trapped by me. He was planning to leave when it was just my 2 older brother, and then my mother got pregnant with me, and he felt obligated to stay. Now that I'm an adult with 2 kids myself, I think I realize that both of my parents are just extremely mentally ill and incapable of loving anyone, including themselves. I've disowned one of my siblings, still have 5 other siblings. My sister is just a horrible person. She's the youngest of the 7, and she's been rotten since she was a teenager. She is much younger than the rest of us, so while the other 6 grew up together, she was almost like an only child. She treats everybody in her life like they're here to serve her needs. Some of the things she's put our mother through are truly horrible. I wouldn't give a shit if she disappeared forever. Often my mom used to say that I didn't love her. Each day it got worse and worse. The affirmations from her saying that started getting to me, and soon enough, I really did stop loving her. She's not an alcoholic, but there have been quite a few nights where she came home very intoxicated and said horrible things to my brother and me. She lies often. I've caught her stealing my money for her gambling addiction. She wastes $200 to $300 weekly on lotto tickets. About 80% of the time, she's not even paying with her money. She is so irresponsible that she's been fired from around 6 jobs in the span of 2 years. I get called many horrible names daily by her. One major thing she does that bugs me is after her screaming session, she'll try to make it up to me, and when I don't reciprocate her affection, she blames our horrible relationship on me. Not me, but my great-grandma. She was a young Creole teenager. Her parents had high expectations for her to marry a wealthy, light-skinned man who would take care of her. Instead, she met my great-grandfather, a poor, dark-skinned man jumping from job to job working for farmers and trying to make a living. The 2 of them fell in love. They were just teenagers. Her parents threatened to disown her if she continued seeing him, and like a rebellious teenager, she refused. They wanted her to do better. She wanted to be in love. They might have broken up eventually if she didn't get pregnant, but she did, and that was the end of it. Her parents basically said, "You've ruined your life," and disowned her right there. The whole family disowned her. No one would speak to her. Aunts, uncles, cousins, not a single person stood up for her. So she had no choice. The 2 of them moved to California so he could get a job picking oranges. He built a house. They had their first daughter. She was 16. She never saw her family again until the day she died. I think she was always a little bitter about being disowned by her family and ended up being disappointed in the life she lived, which is tragic. I think she wanted more. A nicer house, a family to talk to. I know they loved each other, but she could be bitter and angry at life at times. She passed away 20 years ago. He's 95 now, going strong, still fiercely independent, and living in the house he built for them. He has a younger, 73, girlfriend, but he said that he could never remarry. It would be an insult to everything they went through. I wouldn't say I've disowned or stopped loving my son, but it's real tough to find love for him. He's almost 14 next month, and he's currently out of our home at a treatment facility. He's averaged 2 arrests a year for the last 2 years, and he's attacked my wife several times, our daughters several times, and the neighborhood kids several times. He's run away from school, run away from home, and tried to push me off the roof of our house after threatening to jump off and hurt himself. We have become that family in our town where the police are called to our home on a semi-regular basis. He's been getting more violent as he gets older, not to mention bigger and stronger, and I honestly don't see an end in sight. The key fact I'm leaving out is that he's been diagnosed as high-functioning autistic and is also bipolar. That's like putting walls around a tornado and expecting it to stay inside the walls. A lot of what has occurred he had little control over because of the way his mind is, where he's constantly at war with himself, structure versus chaos. And my wife and I have tried desperately to give him the best life we can while keeping ourselves and our daughters safe, but I'm tired. It's been 8.5 years we've been going through this with him, and I've been ready to throw in the towel on him for a while. But my wife refuses to let him go. So we wake up every morning trying to give him the best life for him and our girls. My father had this incredible stupid butch as a wife. She is just terrible. She left him, owed me quite a bit of money, cheated on my father, and on and on. After 3 years of marriage, she is around 36 and my father is 50. He did everything for her, and she just made him miserable, but he kept going. When she left my father, he became really depressed, and I cared for him, hoping that he would get over the whole situation, etc. We even fought the whole divorce together. He got better and everything. I was really happy for him. Then came the day that she had no money left, and she came back to my father. He told me about it, and I was so angry that he didn't learn from the story before. I told him that I don't want to see her ever again, and I won't do anything with him if she there as well. The day came when my father and I wanted to meet for lunch. As I arrived, I saw her sitting there with him. I went to the place and said that she had to leave, or I'm gonna leave. He became mad for that, and I left. He tried to do the same move again. I told him to fuck off and never spoke to him again. I never trusted this woman. It became better, and then I found out about her cheating, lying, and everything. She told me to fuck off when I wanted my money back. I won't trust her ever again, but I can't help my dad. I told him everything, and he is still blind through those love curtains. Do adopted kids count? We adopted a 3-year-old from foster care. Cutest, sweetest kid. He had a few issues, but we mostly figured it was because of his history. The issues escalated quickly. When he was 7, he hit our dog with a golf club. We had to keep him away from our dog and our cat. The cat disappeared. We assumed she got out and ran away. Found out years later that he killed it and threw it in the woods. The last straw was when he burned our home down. We sent him to a residential treatment center where he stayed for 2 years. During that time, he molested a roommate and became extremely violent. The insurance company told us that they wouldn't pay anymore, and we'd either have to pay for him out of pocket, $40,000 a month, or bring him home. We have younger children, and it wouldn't be safe. We ended up telling the state we wouldn't bring him home. So now we have a verified abuse report against us because we wouldn't bring him back, even though the therapists agreed with our decision. I don't love him. I wish the best for him, but I don't feel anything toward him. I have been legally disowned by my father. When I was 11, my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. This was her second diagnosis in around 4 years. Obviously, she recovered the first time after intense surgery and a lot of chemo, and he did not want to look after her like he did before. He also had a new GF and her family to look after apparently, and he had no issues leaving us. When my mom passed away when I was 14, my brother, grandmother, him and I met up to discuss who I was going to live with. The plan was my brother and his family. Father was never considered. And he showed up and declared that he was in the process of going to court to legally emancipate himself from me. He went out of his way to legally declare that I was no longer his child, just so that my brother, 22 years old with a wife and 2 young children already struggling on 1 paycheck, couldn't seek child support. Needless to say, it stung coming only days after my mother's funeral. My ex-wife disowned my son. We both married young when I was in the military, high school sweethearts. She became pregnant 6 months into our marriage. I don't think she connected with him at all after he was born. The most she did with him was Instagram photo shoots where she painted herself as #1 mommy. When he turned 3, I left the military. A year after that, she ran for the hills. I remember it like it was yesterday. I sat down with her at a local restaurant to talk divorce plans. We split all of our financials and material items down the middle. We finally got to custody for my kiddo, something I dreaded to discuss because fathers never gain custody in my area, and she tells me, I want absolutely no responsibility. I was taken back and I asked if she was sure. She was. That one sentence hurt me more than anything else that happened during that time. My biological father wanted nothing to do with me, and now I was seeing it happen with my own child, but with his mother. I received full custody and she married within a year afterwards. She had another child too. Her parents try their best to be a part of his life, but she still does her best to avoid him. My kiddo is a very awesome kid that has shown great resiliency beyond his years. He has rolled through the tough times better than even I. I can just hope he doesn't question his worth because of what his mom did. I know I question mine due to my own father leaving, and that has left scars that will not heal. My parents disowned my oldest sister. She always struggled growing up more than us. She became a teen mom with a bad older dude, partied a lot, etc. But my parents helped her a lot. They do okay for themselves, but had a no co-signing rule for all 6 of my siblings and I. Still, they co-signed for her house so she could get a head start. She didn't pay the mortgage for almost 3 years before my mom got served in front of all the other nurses at her work. My parents worked tirelessly to try to work out deals where my sister and her family kept the house and got some leniency, but to no avail because my sister never showed up for court dates. During this time, she paid $12,000 for IVF and got pregnant with her 5th kid. When my mom demanded some of the money back, she accused my dad and my brother of beating her sons when my parents took them to Disney World. He didn't, and said she'd file a police report if he asked for money again. They kept asking, 'cause it wasn't true. She awkwardly joined us for Christmas and punched my brother in the face during the meal for humiliating her oldest son by asking him if he wanted to work at my brother's company for good pay. Her oldest son is in and out of jail, and my brother was trying to help him after his release, but her son said he didn't want a job and got mad. She then called the cops and told them the same brother had illegal guns in his truck, and they came on Christmas night and searched his truck. No guns found. Needless to say, she is not welcome anywhere near any of us, and my mom still cries about it, but refuses to talk to her again. I was disowned, but I deserved it. I was an addict and a mess for a long time. My mom couldn't keep bailing me out of trouble and watch me self-destruct anymore. I wasn't living at home. She came to see me one last time to tell me she was done. Not to contact her. She would no longer have anything to do with me. She was in pieces. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for her. But it was the best thing she ever did for me. Once she cut me off, my rock bottom came hard and fast. After a little while of living on the streets and my addiction consuming me, I made my way to a detox center, got a few days clean under my belt, and never looked back. That was almost 15 years ago. After I was clean a little while, I contacted my mom, and little by little we built a relationship again, and now we're really close. I am forever grateful to my mom for letting me fall and letting me back into her life.
Story 2. I'm not a parent. I've never disowned a child. My parents disowned my oldest sister. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. My oldest sister had a horrible relationship with my father, blames me for getting in the way of their relationship. She had her first baby to spite him when she was 16 years old. My father refused to give her money because she met a deadbeat child predator and got pregnant again and again. She constantly put herself and deadbeat before kids. Dad would send money to girls for Christmas and birthdays and never heard a thing. He finally gave up. She's 30, has 6 daughters, and lives in a mobile home in North Carolina. We hadn't seen or heard from my sister until June of this year. My oldest niece contacted me asking to come to Florida, where I live, for the summer to get her and her sisters out of the trailer. I agree, contact sister, and she agrees. I set up plane tickets and organized the rooms they'll stay in. When they got here, they were completely disheveled. Clothes visibly dirty, smelled foul, so covered in lice that my white towels stained gray from removing them. My niece informed me that they had been without water and electricity for 6 months. They live in a 2-bedroom mobile home. There are holes in the roof, bugs and rats everywhere. As a family, we decide the girls aren't going back to North Carolina. We tell my sister to come to my parents' house in Florida to get her life together and get back on her feet. She refused because deadbeat is not invited. Ironically, she found out that deadbeat is cheating on her. She confronts him and he kicks her out of shithole trailer. Deadbeat said, "I would rather be homeless than live with you." Sister now works for the dollar store and doesn't pull her weight with kids. At least the girls are safe now. Edit. I never really finished my point with the story. My parents had disowned my oldest sister when she moved to North Carolina with deadbeat for 6 years, until my niece reached out to me through Facebook. I had never even met my 2 youngest nieces until this event. I regret turning my back on my sister. I really hate her and what she put her babies through, but if we stayed in her life for those 6 years, we maybe could have prevented this.
I disowned my father. I don't believe that it nearly as difficult a decision as disowning a child, but it was tough. I grew up in an upper-middle-class, perfect nuclear family. My parents were high school sweethearts. My dad was an operator at an oil refinery. My mom was an accountant turned stay-at-home mom. I am a middle child. I have a 3-year older brother and a 3-year younger brother. When my older brother was about 10, my dad's drinking got out of hand and became extremely physically abusive. A few years later, my mom divorced him after 23 years of marriage because she was afraid for our lives. My dad went off the deep end, started doing drugs, stealing, etc. Was involved in a few hit-and-runs. My older brother, who had received the brunt of the physical abuse, was manipulated into a relationship with my dad for a few years. To a lesser extent, so was I. He seemed to take an interest in us for the first time since we were little, but in hindsight it was just more manipulation and gaslighting. Won't go into all of the details, but my brothers and I eventually got wind of just what kind of sketchy stuff he was involved in. My little brother and I, who both had aspirations to get into law enforcement, cut him out of our lives completely. My older brother took a while longer. He was a kid who always just wanted his dad to love him, and so he was wearing blinders. He did eventually see the light and cut my dad out as well. A few years ago, my dad was living with his mom. My grandma had been manipulated by him for years, and they had a symbiotic co-dependent relationship. She was a prescription addict, and he was an everything addict. My grandma had a reverse mortgage on her home. She was diagnosed with lung cancer and given 6 months to live, and moved into a nursing home. My dad kept squatting at her house, despite the bank coming to rightfully claim the home. Cops got involved, and he was arrested. My grandma slipped and fell 2 days after moving to the nursing home. She developed a brain bleed and died a few days later. My dad had a seizure his first night in jail and was brought to the hospital, where it was determined he had a burst brain aneurysm. The doctors theorized that the aneurysm was the result of his drug use, and when he was scuffling with the cops during the arrest, his increased blood pressure and/or jarring caused it to burst. He's now in a nursing home and functioning at about a 6-year-old's level. He has some inkling that he's fucked up royally, and it is all his fault, but he really doesn't understand the specifics. He can kind of communicate and hold conversations, but they're bizarre and wander all over, and a lot of very strange words make their way in. I visit him a few times per year. I only do it because the person he became with addiction is dead. I believe that karma caught up to him, and he's earned his hell. I truly would not shed a tear if he dropped dead tomorrow. He's been dead to me for a decade. I do have some compassion for a sad, confused 58-year-old man who is alone in a depressing nursing home with no visitors. He knows he has kids and a wife. He doesn't understand they're divorced. And sometimes he even knows he has grandkids he has never been allowed to meet. So he doesn't understand why nobody visits him. I've started occasional visits not because I have any interest in having a relationship with him, but because unfortunately the doctors saved him when his aneurysm burst, and we're left with a person who is paying for crimes he doesn't know he committed, in a world he doesn't understand. He sometimes cries when he asks to see pictures of that little boy, my nephew, his grandson, and I have to explain, yet again, why he isn't allowed to meet him. He asks me questions about that cop, my little brother, whose name he can't remember. He looks so proud when I tell him that his son is rising through the ranks and just became a K-9 officer. It's like a shard of the dad he was 25 years ago has surfaced, and everything in between only exists as a convoluted fever dream. It tears my heart open as a human to see his suffering, but in a really twisted, sick way gives me satisfaction that his actions caught up to him, which makes me hate myself even more than I already did. I doubt anyone has read this. It wasn't supposed to be a novel. But that's how I disowned my dad, then kind of developed a minimal relationship with the ghost of his former humanity that now occupies his body. My heart goes out to people who have had to disown a child. I was extremely fortunate to have an incredible mom and extended family to support my brothers and me, yet I am still damaged from my time with him. Having to choose between compassion and love for a flawed person and your own or your other loved one's physical and mental well-being rips something open inside of you and leaves you permanently scarred.